I remember very clearly the moment when the numbers on my laptop screen started to fade, and all I could see was the cold, impassive face of Derek, the new CEO of the company. Even though I had prepared myself mentally for this, hearing his words still hit me like a suffocating blow. "Your career is over, Emily." Those words were like a sharp sting to my heart, severing everything I had worked for over the years. All I could do was sit still, staring at the screen filled with the emotionless faces of the people in the meeting. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, I couldn't control the emptiness that began to consume me. The company I had built from the ground up, the one I had dedicated myself to from day one, now cast me aside like an expired product. This company, where I had forged lasting relationships with key clients, now turned its back on me as I faced the greatest challenges of my life. It was a shock, not only professionally, but emotionally. Working for a leading media company, where perfection was the standard, I had always taken pride in the projects I led and the strategies I developed with my team. But now, I was nothing to them. "We've reviewed everything, and the final decision is to let you go," Derek said, his voice cold, as if it was of no consequence. "While your past achievements are commendable, your recent work performance does not meet expectations." These words didn't just hurt, they humiliated me. All the effort, all the dedication I had put into my work seemed to mean nothing in their eyes. I tried to contain my emotions, but my heart was shattered. The reason I was fired wasn't because I had failed in my duties, but because of Derek, a newcomer who judged me by numbers, simply because he couldn't see the value in the relationships I had built over the years. He only saw numbers and statistics, where everything could be changed by a formula he created. All the people I had helped, the clients I had served with devotion, were now nothing more than figures on a spreadsheet. But I still couldn't believe that after all I had done, I was pushed out like an old, worn-out object. After the meeting, I sat in my office, the dim yellow light from the ceiling casting a glow on the walls. Everything felt eerily still, as if time had stopped. I couldn't believe what had just happened. We had once shared a relationship built on trust, but now, all of it had crumbled in a single moment. And it wasn't just my work that was affected. I began to wonder if everything I had built in my personal life could be so easily destroyed as well. How could I explain this to my husband, David, and my children? How could I face them when I couldn't even face myself? My heart was full of worry, but I couldn't let that fear paralyze me. I stood up and walked out of the office, but each step felt heavier than the last. Thoughts relentlessly spun in my head. Why me? What did I do wrong? I remembered the early days when I first joined the company, the dreams, the hopes for a bright future. But now, all I could feel was the bitter sting of failure. I couldn't forget the feeling of being underestimated, being replaced so coldly and without compassion. That night, when I sat alone in the living room, the light from my phone screen made me stop in my tracks. A message from Kayla, a close colleague, appeared. "Emily, I can't believe this happened. Did they really do this to you?" A wave of helplessness and pain surged within me, but there was nothing I could do. I couldn't break this professional bond, but I couldn't accept the way they treated me either. This wasn't fairness. This was a ruthless, unforgiving destruction. Amid the endless nights, I drowned in dark thoughts, unsure of what to do next. It wasn't just my career, but my faith in people, in everything I had once believed in. That was starting to waver. Every time I looked at the old laptop, which held all my past projects, I felt trapped. How could I rise after all this hurt? But then, it dawned on me I couldn't keep drowning in this pain. I couldn't just let everything slip away without doing anything. And in that moment, I knew I had to stand up, not for revenge, but to prove to myself that I deserved more than what they had given me. This was the beginning of a new journey, not a battle to destroy them, but a battle to reclaim myself. There were mornings when I woke up, not knowing exactly where to begin. My schedule, once filled with meetings, emails, and brand strategies, now felt strangely empty. I made coffee out of habit, sitting in front of an unused computer screen, holding my cup but not drinking. The sunlight streaming through the living room window wasn't enough to make today feel any different from yesterday. But in the silence, a small thought began to grow, like a seed pushing through a crack in a stone. If they could judge me based on just a few numbers and pre-calculated words, then I needed a way to remind myself that what I had built was real, not through complaints or explanations, but by rewriting everything. I opened my laptop for the first time in days, not to work, but to revisit the old campaigns I had once designed. The presentation slides I used to perfect late into the night, the thank you emails from clients, the KPI reports I personally crafted. I didn't try to relive any pride. I simply wanted to remind myself that it existed. That feeling didn't provide immediate comfort, but it helped me start to crawl out of the swamp of self-doubt. In the silence, I created a folder called Core, Inside. I gathered everything: data, achievements, even the client feedback I had once considered rewards, not to prove anything to anyone, but to lay the foundation for something else, something new that I hadn't yet named. David noticed how many hours I spent at my computer each day, but didn't ask much. He just left a plate of cut fruit on my desk or refilled my water. We didn't talk much about my firing anymore, as if we both understood that discussing it would only make things heavier. My daughter, Clara, asked why I wasn't going to work, and I simply told her I was thinking of a new project. That wasn't just to comfort her, but a reminder to myself. I began reading about communication strategies in post-crisis phases, searching for new market trends. I took notes, not expecting too much, just learning again from the beginning, like a student starting fresh. A week later, I received a message from Kayla. She told me that Derek was bringing over people from his old company to replace the entire marketing team. The personalized campaigns I had once built were now being replaced by generic templates. With reduced budgets and the use of mass automation, I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. Garrison Publishing, my biggest client, had reacted negatively and was considering changing partners. Kayla also sent me an internal email. She had accidentally come across Derek was restructuring personnel and branding strategies to serve the IPO plan. I read that line over and over, as though it were a confession about the trap I had fallen into. I didn't reply to Kayla immediately. Instead, I sat in silence as the evening shadows grew longer, thinking about those caught in this whirlwind. Jamie, a longtime colleague I had trusted with the toughest projects, was now being reevaluated. People who had once been loyal to me were no longer valued because they didn't fit into the cut and optimize strategy inside me. A feeling arose, not anger, but a strange sorrow. I had once believed that true value would be recognized if we did good work, but now I began to understand that there are systems that don't measure that, and even deliberately overlook it. I started reaching out to a few old contacts, not to ask for a job, but to see if there was a chance to do something truly meaningful. A former friend in the short film production industry mentioned that they were looking for an experienced communications consultant, especially in connecting brands with personal stories. The phrase emotion-based marketing suddenly came back to me. It was the philosophy I had always followed. where people connect with people, where a brand is not just a logo, but a belief. And then, one night, as I was reviewing old files, I received an email from Jasmine Davis. She had been my assistant for 3 years before moving to the strategy department. In the email, she mentioned that Jamie had been suspended for lack of cooperation after suggesting that the new strategy wasn't suitable for long-term clients. Jasmine emphasized something I couldn't ignore. Emily, it seems like they're trying to erase you completely from the system. The old reports with your name are being reformatted, and you're nearly gone from the main archives. I froze. I was no longer just someone who was fired. They were erasing me, as if I had never existed. In my mind, I heard the tapping of a keyboard, not the kind of typing to write an apology or plea, but the tapping of someone gathering evidence. Every report I had kept, every email, every client feedback, I didn't know exactly what I would do with them, but I knew one thing: I would not stay silent. I began organizing all the data into a complete file. No judgment, no commentary, just numbers, evidence, specific dates, and authentic feedback. That was how I reminded myself of the true value of what I had done, not to retaliate, but to preserve the truth. Every night, I would open a new folder, naming it after each project I had worked on. Each name was a memory, but now it also became a piece of armor to protect me on the journey ahead. When I completed the file, I still didn't know where I would go or what I would do, but I knew I had the foundation, and from here, I could begin a new path, no longer in the shadow of my old company, no longer twisted by vague words, but a journey of rebuilding from the fragments. As each day passed, I began to realize that, although I was no longer a part of my old company, I couldn't completely cut myself off from the invisible ties that Derek and the others had created. But with every passing moment, I found myself growing stronger. I was no longer the one left in the shadows. I was the one slowly stepping back into the light. In the early days, when I first began reaching out to old clients, I wasn't sure how they would respond. Some were confused. Some didn't understand why I had left, and others responded with cold indifference. But then, one message from Garrison Publishing arrived, and it changed everything. William Garrison, the CEO of the company, sent me a short email. "Emily, I heard about what happened. We can't wait any longer. Let's meet." My heart raced, not with worry, but with the excitement of unexpected opportunities. I couldn't believe it. Garrison Publishing, one of the biggest clients I had built relationships with over the years, still trusted me, despite everything, immediately. I made plans to meet him, not to ask for a job, but to discuss a new project, another opportunity, meeting William at a quiet cafe. I sat across from him, trying to maintain my composure. He studied me for a long moment, as if searching for something in my eyes. "I don't need to talk about how you've been treated," William said, his voice firm. "I just want to know if you're ready to start over." In that instant, I realized that what I had lost wasn't the end, but rather an opportunity to begin again, an opportunity to rebuild strong relationships, an opportunity to prove that what Derek and the old company thought of me was wrong. After that meeting, I began to rebuild myself. I started reconnecting with old contacts, the clients I had worked with in the past. I shared with them new projects, bold ideas I believed would bring great results. But what I didn't expect was that some of them began reacting strongly. "Emily, you're no longer with Pinnacle, so who will be responsible for our marketing campaigns?" One major client asked, a hint of worry in their voice. "What has Derek done with your entire marketing team?" I asked in return, and the answers I received were hesitant, unclear. Then, one day, while I was sifting through the old files of my former company, I found an email I hadn't expected to see. It was a message from Derek. one I had accidentally overlooked in my personal email archive. I want you to come up with a strategy to completely change our marketing. Jamie has been nominated as the next after Emily leaves. Don't let anyone know about these changes until we're ready. Reading those words, I felt anger surge within me. Derek hadn't just removed me from the company. He was deliberately trying to erase all traces of me from the campaigns I had built. There was no doubt anymore. His strategy wasn't just about changing the people. It was about trying to obliterate the value I had contributed. The following day, I began gathering related documents, meticulously sorting through evidence to expose the wrongs Derek had caused. This wasn't about revenge, but about shedding light on the truth that I couldn't allow those around me to misunderstand. Every client I had worked with, every project I had completed, was carefully recorded, not just in numbers, but in the feelings and attention that went into every strategy. Then, a twist occurred. One of Pinnacle's major clients, Garrison Publishing, unexpectedly announced they were halting their partnership with the company, citing the changes Derek had implemented as the reason. William Garrison had been opposing these decisions all along, and now he began reaching out to me to discuss collaborating again. That was when I realized that the changes Derek had made didn't just affect me. They were damaging the very company he was trying to build. Everything was starting to crumble under Derek's own hands. The relationships I had nurtured and developed over the years were coming back, and this time, I wasn't left behind. I didn't need to confront Derek directly to prove that I still had value. He had already lost the opportunity when he tried to change everything without recognizing the core. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply standing firm on my own foundation. And when I saw Derek beginning to lose trust within the company, I knew I was right. That night, as I sat in my small office, the faint glow of the computer screen illuminated my fingers as they glided over the keyboard. Every number, every piece of data on the screen seemed to have become an inseparable part of my life. Over the months of being pushed to the sidelines, I had lost a lot, but I had also found myself again. Everything was beginning to become clearer. While I still couldn't forget the betrayal, I knew that my career couldn't end there. Even though I had been pushed aside, I could start over, and this time, I would do everything on my own terms. After many sleepless nights, I made the decision that I couldn't remain passive any longer. I wouldn't let Derek and my old company continue writing my story. One day, I received a call I never could have imagined. It was Kayla, a former colleague who had already left the company. She told me that Derek had started facing difficulties with the big clients. Garrison Publishing, the strategic client of Pinnacle, had suddenly halted their partnership because they couldn't adapt to the modernization strategy Derek had implemented. Not only had they stopped working with Pinnacle, but they were also in the process of looking for a new partner. And importantly, they had reached out to me. Kayla said that Garrison wanted me back, but this time, not in the same role. They wanted me to lead a new project, a bigger one, where I could create an entirely new strategy from scratch. The feeling of receiving that offer was a remarkable shift. I didn't need to struggle to hold on to my old company, nor did I need to explain why I had been fired. Garrison wanted me, and they believed in my abilities. But more than that, it was a turning point for everything I had been trying to prove over the past months. A major turning point that made me realize that my career didn't have to end at Pinnacle, but that I could rebuild it from my own hands. With the principles and values I had once nurtured, I didn't rush to make a decision. In my heart, I knew I was mature enough to understand that success wasn't always about waiting for recognition from others. True success is when you can create value for yourself and those around you, not through numbers or rankings created by others. The offer from Garrison wasn't just about a job. It was an opportunity to start over, to correct everything that had been misunderstood. That evening, as I sat with David and Clara, I felt a different sense of peace in my heart, though many questions remained unanswered. One thing was clear: I was ready to move forward. The feeling of being forgotten, of being fired, no longer held me back. I looked into David's eyes, and he smiled, as though he understood everything. "You can do it," he said, and in that moment, I no longer felt the loneliness I had before. The next day, I decided to call William Garrison, the CEO of Garrison Publishing, to let him know that I was ready to collaborate with them. William welcomed me with an enticing offer, "Emily. We need someone like you to restructure our strategy. I believe that with your ability, you'll make a real difference for us." At that moment, I could feel that I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, where I no longer had to chase after the hollow targets my old company had imposed, but could now build my own path, where I could decide my own direction. But the changes didn't stop there, just as I had predicted. Derek began to face significant difficulties. His clients, including Garrison Publishing, could no longer tolerate the modernization decisions he had made. Derek's strategies didn't just fail to help the company grow, they caused them to lose important partners. Things got worse when many clients requested to meet with me to discuss recollaborating. I never thought I would be seen in a different light, and in those moments, I realized that I had been right not to give up, not to let myself be pushed out of the game. Looking back, I saw Derek's shift not as a victory, but as a downfall. The more he imposed strategies that didn't fit, the more he alienated key clients. Gradually, the values I had contributed over the years were being erased by the numbers he created. I didn't need to do anything further because his actions had already proven that I was right. Derek, who had once deemed me worthless, was now facing the consequences of his own mistakes. When I received a call from Garrison Publishing, they informed me that they would be signing a long-term partnership with me, and they wanted me to be involved in their long-term strategy. I didn't rush to accept immediately. I needed time to prepare, to make sure I would bring real value. But in that moment, I understood that this turning point wasn't just about having a new job. It was about having the strength to stand tall, to prove my true worth, and to never be subdued again. Sometimes, life doesn't require grand victories or direct confrontations. It only needs small, steadfast steps, quiet yet decisive actions. I learned that over the past few months as I began to rebuild everything from the ruins left by Derek. While he was busy constructing strategies that lacked foundation, I gradually built my own small empire, not from numbers, but from the trust of the old clients I had restored. I didn't want to fight Derek, not because I feared him, but because I knew his downfall would come from the mistakes he couldn't avoid. I had regained my confidence, not through recognition, but through the results I was delivering. After signing with Garrison Publishing, I didn't just restructure their strategy, I began building a new foundation where every project stood as proof of the true value of marketing. A place where it wasn't just about numbers, but about the genuine relationship between brands and customers. With each new campaign, I began to see change. Garrison, despite being a large company, hadn't fully grasped the importance of human connection and communication. When I proposed strategies that went against Derek's methods, focusing on building sustainable relationships and emotional marketing, I saw real results. The first campaigns didn't just meet the goals, they exceeded expectations. Clients were more satisfied, revenue increased, and most importantly, I felt trust being rebuilt. Nothing was more valuable than hearing old clients call back to say they got what they wanted, that they felt understood, and that they were no longer just a means to profit. as I slowly succeeded. Derek kept making things worse. Clients began to boycott his new strategies. They requested to meet with me directly because they no longer felt connected to the strategies Derek had implemented. Those who had once trusted him began to leave, and his revenue reports plummeted. Derek, the one who had pushed me out, now had to face the poor decisions he had made. I didn't need to confront him directly because the results would speak for themselves, day by day. I saw changes not only from the clients, but also from former employees at Pinnacle. Jamie, the colleague I had once mentored, after being cast aside by Derek, found a job at a competitor's company. She became a collaborator in my new strategies. Together, we began to rebuild a strong network I had once lost. This feeling was different. I was no longer someone trying to prove myself, but someone rebuilding what had been broken. Numbers were no longer the only measure of me. Real relationships were what mattered, and I began to realize that I had been right to always believe in the value of people over numbers. One late afternoon, I received an email from William Garrison. He sent me a short message, "Emily, you've done amazing things. The company is seeing real results. We want to continue working with you long term." These words made me smile. I had started over, not out of revenge, but because I had done the right thing. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone because the results I created spoke for themselves. No more manipulation, no more betrayal, only real relationships. And I had found trust again, both in work and in life. Then one day, when I heard that Derek was let go by his former company for failing to meet the set targets, I didn't feel joy, not because I had any regrets, but because I understood that his career had ended on its own. The wrong strategies, the poor decisions, and the broken relationships led him to a conclusion no one could avoid. Derek didn't just lose his job, he lost the trust of those he had wronged. That price was part of life, part of what he had sowed. As for me, I didn't need to confront or mock him. I just knew that I had risen after everything, not only to prove those who betrayed me wrong, but also to prove to myself that true values never fade. My success wasn't the scar of revenge, but proof of a steadfast journey, where I found strength not in confrontation, but in the ability to recover and rebuild from the fragments. And as I learned throughout this journey, sometimes the greatest revenge is success built on sincerity, trust, and true value, not based on undermining or blaming others.